The head of the European Central Bank, the boss of BlackRock, and the founder of Citadel just sat on a stage in Davos and basically admitted the $38 trillion U.S. debt, AI, and geopolitics are now the same story. One of them warned about debt addiction, another is betting on an AI productivity boom, and they quietly spelled out who gets crushed if they're wrong. Welcome back to the comment section with Thomas Paul. Let's unpack what they just revealed, what they carefully didn't say, and what it means for your money. Here's where things get interesting. At Davos, this panel was supposed to be about global risks, translated into normal English. Can the U.S. keep borrowing like a teenager with dad's credit card while AI magically fixes everything later? On one side, you have Christine Lagarde warning about fragmentation, fiscal indiscipline, and political denial about aging populations and welfare states. On the other, you've got Larry Fink and Ken Griffin talking about capital markets, AI-driven productivity, and the need for governments to get serious about budgets. The number haunting the whole conversation: U.S. debt at roughly $38 trillion. Interest costs alone are now rivaling major government programs. That's the part they almost whisper, because once interest is your biggest line item, you're not really choosing policy anymore. The bond market is. But it's even getting worse. The tension on that stage was simple. Can AI growth outrun the cost of debt, or do we hit a wall first? Griffin argues I could unlock huge efficiency gains, better logistics, automated white-collar work, faster scientific discovery. In theory, that means higher growth, more tax revenue, and a softer landing for the debt problem. Fink leans into this too. Global capital is still flooding into U.S. markets because, flawed as it is, there's no better alternative at scale. Lagarde is the one saying, hold on. Her concern: AI is not a free lunch. You need data, chips, energy, and stability. If the world fractures into rival camps, with export controls, sanctions, and competing AI blocks, that productivity miracle gets slower, more expensive, and more dangerous. And here's where things take a step further. They weren't just talking about numbers, they were talking about power. If the U.S. keeps piling on debt while depending on AI to save the day, any shock, geopolitical, technological, or financial, hits a much more fragile system. If that sounds abstract, remember, when I was about 12, my parents trusted a bank advisor who said, "Don't worry, it's safe." It wasn't. We didn't lose everything, but dinner got very quiet for a long time. That's when I learned. Experts can be sincere and still be dangerously wrong. Same energy here. These are very smart people on stage, but the stakes are your mortgage, your job, your retirement, not theirs. But then the unbelievable thing happened. They basically admitted that the era of free money fixes everything is over. The message: governments need to tighten up fiscal policy. Central banks can't keep bailing everyone out forever. Markets are already adjusting to a world of higher, stickier rates. Griffin emphasized that capital markets will punish countries that keep pretending deficits don't matter. Translation: if you think bond yields only go down, you have not been paying attention. Lagarde stressed that fiscal discipline isn't optional anymore, especially with aging populations. If politicians won't do the hard choices, the bond market will. That's not a negotiation. That's gravity. Here's where things get interesting. They also dug into AI as both solution and risk. On the plus side, AI could raise productivity, which is the only sustainable way out of a debt trap. Companies that adopt AI well could see margins and profits explode. Entire new industries, from data centers to energy infrastructure, stand to benefit. On the risk side, massive concentration, a few tech giants, a few chip suppliers, a few data owners. Geopolitical race: U.S. versus China versus everyone else, with export controls and sanctions. Labor disruption: people losing middle-income jobs long before governments figure out how to retrain them. Lagarde also pointed out a quieter risk: regulatory overreach. If governments react to AI by strangling it with inconsistent rules, you get the worst combo: slower growth, but the same giant debt pile. But it's even getting worse. This is where markets come in. Investors are already trying to price how many rate cuts, if any. Can growth offset the drag from debt service? Which sectors win in an AI-heavy high-debt world? From the panel, a few clear takeaways. Bonds are not the boring, safe asset they used to be. Interest rate risk is very real. Equities tied to real productivity, automation, infrastructure, energy are in favor. Highly leveraged, low-margin businesses are in the danger zone if financing stays expensive. And here's where things take a step further. There was also a political layer they mostly danced around. High debt plus slower growth plus visible AI disruption is a recipe for populism, protectionism, and blame someone else politics. Once that kicks in, you tend to see higher trade barriers, which hurt productivity, random windfall taxes, which scare long-term capital, pressure on central banks to just print a bit more. That's the loop we're in danger of repeating. When I worked at a local newspaper in college, I saw how the same economic story got 3 totally different headlines depending on what mood the editor was in. The numbers didn't change. The framing did. Watching this Davos panel, I had the same feeling. The framing is managed, but the math is stubborn. But then he said this unbelievable thing. The part that really stuck out was the quiet consensus. Nobody on that stage believes we're going back to zero rates and endless QE as the normal baseline. They talked about normalized policy, responsibility, and discipline. Decoded, they know the old playbook broke the system. They just can't say it that bluntly. Here's where things get interesting. So what does this mean for you, sitting at home trying not to get wrecked? First, assume volatility is the new normal. When the cost of money is uncertain, asset prices swing harder. If you're leveraged, margin, floating rate debt, speculative bets, you're the shock absorber. Second, pay attention to who actually benefits from AI, not who just says AI in every earnings call. Real winners tend to control data, control compute, chips, cloud, or sell the picks and shovels, power, cooling, infrastructure. Third, don't ignore political risk. Fragmentation in trade, data, and capital flows can kill even good economic stories. In terms of how I plan to invest, I'm not chasing every shiny AI stock, and I'm not pretending government bonds are risk-free. I'm doing 3 boring things: keeping a margin of safety, low leverage, high liquidity. Owning businesses with real cash flows and pricing power, not just stories. Spreading risk across sectors that either benefit from higher rates, some financials, or from AI-driven CapEx, infrastructure, energy, certain tech. Years ago, I invested in something boring and unfashionable while everyone else chased hype. It didn't make me rich overnight, but it worked, slowly. That experience is why I'm not betting my future on a Davos panel's optimism. And here's where things take a step further. Quick note. This video was created with Fludge.io, the same system that powers this entire channel. If you're watching this thinking, I'd love to run a YouTube channel like this, but I don't want to be on camera, that's literally what it's built for. Fludge finds topics in your niche, does the research, writes the script, builds the thumbnail, uses an AI avatar, and uploads to YouTube. You stay in control. You can jump in at any step, rewrite, record your own video if you want, and steer the style over time. It's not low-effort spam. The whole point is high-quality, consistent content without burning out. If that sounds interesting, check out Fludge.io. But then the unbelievable thing happened. As this Davos talk wrapped, there was this unspoken message. We got used to a world where central banks could fix almost anything. That world is gone. From here on, debt levels matter, AI matters, geopolitics matters, and they all interact. So here's how I'd summarize it. If AI delivers big productivity, we muddle through a messy but manageable adjustment. If AI disappoints or fragmentation kills the gains, then that $38 trillion debt becomes a much more serious problem, much faster. This is not about predicting a crash on Tuesday at 3:12 p.m. It's about understanding that the margin for error is shrinking and planning so you're not the one holding the bag. Disclaimer before we wrap. None of this is financial advice. This show is for education and entertainment only. Always do your own research and talk to a licensed professional before making investing decisions. If you made it this far, I want your take. Who do you think is closer to the truth? Lagarde with her warnings, or the market guys betting on AI to save the day? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want more deep dives like this, less hype, more data, and a bit of dry sarcasm, hit like, subscribe to the comment section with Thomas Paul, and turn on notifications. I'll see you in the next one.